Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and this is episode 162 of the Conscious Resistance Live, brought to you by Civil. Guys, I got a really big show for you this week. There's lots to talk about. I'm not going to be picking up on any threads of the Charlie Kirk story, the assassination, although there's a lot to talk about there, and I will be talking about again next week. But right now it felt like there's a few other areas that I think we could get into that are important. So let me just give you a preview of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about the breaking news that Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, are claiming that there is a new peace plan that is going to, stop the violence in Palestine. We're going to pick up on the story I talked about last week about the domestic extremist, domestic terrorist trap that so many are falling into, including the development that Trump is now sending troops to Portland and what that means and how this is all just part of the erosion of civil liberties. Whether you are against Antifa or illegal immigration, you are supporting and condoning your own eventual enslavement in the future. The second story we're going to talk about is rule changes at the Pentagon regarding journalists and what they can talk about, and how this plays into a bigger picture of the Trump administration clamping down on transparency, and also the technocrats partnered with the Trump administration trying to get as much control of the media landscape as they possibly can, including TikTok. Third story, we're going to pick up about this digital ID announcement in the UK. And then the final story is going to be what I talked about last week, which I teased, which is an update on the Utah ritual abuse investigation. And for those of you who are true crime theorists and true crime fans, or people who are concerned about ritualistic abuse, I hope you will stay all the way to the end of the show, because I really am going to need your help in that regard. So those are the four stories, the four main stories we're going to be covering tonight. And then, of course, we'll close with a closing thought and some music, as we always do here at the Conscious Resistance Live. And of course, as I mentioned to you a couple of moments ago, this show is now brought to you by Civil. That's CIVL.com, as you can see right up here on the video screen. And they are a partner of mine now. Civil.com/TCR is the best place to go learn about it. I've been really kind of ranting and raving about it the last couple of weeks, because we just started our partnership, and I'm super excited about the potential of what's to come. As I've shared with you guys in recent weeks, we're going to be working on new documentary films. We're going to be working on skill shares, master classes. We're also going to be releasing the conclusion, the final episode of the Pyramid of Power docuseries exclusively on Civil starting in November. And I couldn't be doing this work without the support of people like them. For the last 15 years, I've relied exclusively on all of you out there for your kind support, investments in my work via Substack, Buy Me a Coffee, donations in the mail, and then, of course, getting paid for my journalism. And I love that. I'm going to continue to write, and I'm going to continue to ask for your support so I can do my work. And at the same time, coming together with a company like Civil, who has the resources and the funding to help boost everything I'm doing, it's just a dream come true. So I highly encourage you guys to check them out, because again, their whole mission is to elevate human civilization by promoting human respect, voluntarism, conversation and dialogue across partisan lines. And if you're in my audience, I think by now most of you understand that this whole left-right paradigm is really just another construct designed to divide the people. And so if we want to move beyond that, then we need to rise above it and be willing to have respectful, open, critically thinking conversations with people of all types. And I hope that those who listen to my work really do understand that message, and because it's true to what I do with the Conscious Resistance, and now I get to do it even more with Civil. So thanks everybody over at Civil. If you want to learn more, go to CIVL.com/TCR. All right, I think we should go ahead and get into the first story. Just briefly want to mention, as I said, that there has been, the breaking news as I'm recording this is this peace deal announced with the United States and Israel. And this is, of course, Trump is, he's tooting his own horn about this, saying that he made this great deal. They have a graphic that you can find online that details how there's going to be a new map of Gaza that Donald Trump and Netanyahu are calling for. And just quickly, what they're saying is that this the full plan released by Trump would be There's going to be occupation continuing as, disguised as stabilization. They're saying there's going to be promoting democracy and prosperity. But as we can expect with these kind of things based on history, that there will probably be a puppet administration that's going to follow whatever the U.S. or Israel wants. And they talk about there's going to be economic reconstruction, which will probably benefit all the Western contractors and investors who are, friends with the Trump administration or who've donated to the Trump administration. And then, of course, there's going to be technocratic supervision, surveillance of the Palestinians, which will not lead to sovereignty for them. And I think it's essentially just more colonialism. And after Netanyahu and Trump announced this, quote, Netanyahu said, Hamas will be disarmed, Gaza will be demilitarized, and Israel will retain security responsibility, including a security perimeter for the foreseeable future. So I don't know exactly what's going to change. Trump said he would fully support Israel if Hamas rejects the proposed deal to end the conflict. And then Trump is saying, the fact that some European states are recognizing Palestine as a state is a big mistake. And here's the threat. Here's from Netanyahu, quote, but if Hamas rejects your plan, Mr. President, or if they supposedly accept it and then do everything to counter it, then Israel will finish the job by itself. This can be done the easy way, or it can be done the hard way, but it will be done. And then just breaking right now, a Hamas official says, quote, we were not informed of Trump's plan before its announcement, and its terms are close to the Israeli vision. What happened was an attempt to suppress the international momentum and recognitions of the Palestinian state. We will review the American proposal and discuss it with the Palestinian factions. The Trump plan has not reached us and has not yet reached any Palestinian entity. First, we must receive this plan in writing, and clearly, then we will express our opinion about it. So we're going to keep you guys informed on that. But overall, my kind of initial thoughts are this isn't going to be good for the Palestinian people. It's not going to lead to any sort of long-term peace, despite what people are claiming. So that's unfortunate, but I think that we should expect to see more colonization and death and murder of the Palestinian people under the Israelis. Now, before we go any further, I do want to remind everybody to visit our website, theconsciousresistance.com. Guys, this is where I've been producing all of my content, documentaries, books, interviews, podcasts, reports, so much content here, articles since 2013. And if you want to learn more about my work, this is the best place to do it. I know some of you follow me exclusively on social media. I encourage you to not just get stuck on social media, to visit my website, theconsciousresistance.com, once a week. Get plugged in. This is where you can find the audio and video versions of all my work. You don't need to be dependent on social media to get you the truth. So picking up on where we left off last week, talking about how Antifa was about to be designated a domestic terrorist organization. As I was recording last week, that was what the reporting was saying. And then it was made official later that night, September 22nd, after I finished recording. Here's the executive order for those who are watching on the screen, designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. Now, I don't want to repeat too much of what I said in last week's report. If you're interested in that, you can go to theconsciousresistance.com, look up my clip from that called The Domestic Terror Trap is Set, if you want to see my thoughts on it. But I wanted to go over the executive order here real quick to show you some of the dangers in this whole thing here. Now, first of all, let's just look at the first couple of lines here. It says, Antifa is a militarist, anarchist enterprise that explicitly calls for the overthrow of the United States government, law enforcement authorities, and our system of law. Now, I want to call attention to the use of the word anarchist right there. Now, it is true that some people who might identify or call themselves Antifa would also consider themselves to be anarchists, not necessarily voluntarist or libertarian anarchists or agorists like myself and others. But these people believe that violence is, a lot of them is a acceptable tactic in the interest of their goals. And, I disagree with that. I think there's a philosophical debate, but I disagree with that. But I want to point out how the word anarchist is explicitly used, guys. And what this reminds me of, 100 years ago, the raids on anarchists, the deporting of people like Emma Goldman and other immigrant anarchists who came to the United States and who were, in some cases, let's just be real, they were legitimately throwing bombs or trying to assassinate president like McKinley. That's called propaganda of the deed in left-wing circles. That's not something, again, that I agree with. But even the fact that we're at a point now where the U.S. government feels like they can say that this is a militarist anarchist enterprise, which again, Antifa is an idea. It's a concept. There's no freaking official roster of members and a president and a board of directors and all this kind of things that the right wing and Trump are trying to portray it as. It is amorphous. It is decentralized. And that's what makes it difficult for them to control. And I love that. I love that this is a decentralized movement. That doesn't mean I have to endorse or support Antifa's actions to recognize the value of decentralization. And that's really a lot of what I've promoted. If you followed my work over the last decade, I promote decentralization. Also, many of you in my audience probably call for the overthrow of the US government or for law enforcement authorities or for the quote system of law. So think about how setting this precedent, having an executive order explicitly using the word anarchist and then equating that with domestic terrorism, as we see literally the headline of the executive order is designating Antifa as a domestic terror organization. But unfortunately, so many people are still caught up in this left-right paradigm, and it's MAGA versus Antifa or the Proud Boys versus Antifa. These are really just gangs who like to fight in the street. And it's the same thing we saw 100 years ago prior to the Third Reich and in other places where Nazis and communists, fascists and communists would start fighting each other in the street. And I don't support either communist or fascist because they're both totalitarian and they both ultimately want to take control of the government in order to enforce their will. But I think this is dangerous step in the wrong direction. Now they say Antifa has created a campaign of violence and terrorism, and it involves coordinated efforts to obstruct enforcement of federal laws through armed standoffs with law enforcement, organized riots, violent assaults on ICE officers, and routine doxing and threats to political figures and activists. Antifa recruits, trains, and radicalizes young Americans to engage in this violence and suppression of political activity. Now, there might be some truth in this, that there are people who, again, as I explained last week, they might not even call themselves Antifa, but they dress in black bloc. They cover their face with masks and gloves and try to prevent their identity from being known, which I can totally understand and empathize with, because the other side, the right wing, will dox people just, as much as they're claiming Antifa doxes politicians. And I'm sorry, but I will admit, I do have an anti-authority bias. So it's hard for me to be pretty sympathetic and feel bad for the politicians and the police and the ICE agents who are upholding this system of tyranny. Now, that doesn't mean I think we should just go around shooting and killing people and that political violence is the answer. But at the end of the day, these people in the jobs that they work, they're upholding this system of violence, this system of oppression. And so it's not just as simple as saying, okay, Antifa are some crazy radicals, let's call them terrorists and round them up, because that's not going to end up good, guys. It's not going to end up going the direction you want. In fact, I think it'll end up going the total opposite direction of where any of us might want. Let's go ahead, though, since this announcement calling Antifa a domestic terrorist organization. I did want to read one more part, actually, real quick. This is another part of the executive order. It says, I hereby designate Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. All relevant executive departments and agencies shall utilize all applicable authorities to investigate, disrupt, and dismantle any and all illegal operations, especially those involving terrorist actions conducted by Antifa or any person claiming to act on behalf of Antifa. Now, I want you to understand, this could include some young teenage punk who has a patch of Antifa on his jacket or a sticker on their laptop or something like that. I mean, in the worst case scenario, this could literally end up where the government just starts going after anybody who's got the words Antifa on a hat, on a shirt, on anything, and then calling them domestic terrorists and locking them away. And for those who think that's far-fetched, under the Trump administration in the first 9 months here, they've already been sending people to Guantanamo Bay, sending people to other countries around the world that they have no connection to. So it's not that far-fetched to imagine this happening to Americans. And it's not just going to be violent, so-called Antifa people. It will expand. And now since this announcement, now we have the Pentagon calling up to 200 National Guard troops after Trump Portland announcement. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Sunday ordered 200 National Guard troops to be deployed under federal authority, while the state filed a lawsuit challenging Trump's move to send military forces into Portland. Now, this is just stoking the flames of the fire, guys. This is just pouring fuel directly onto it. If you've ever been to Portland, it's a beautiful city, and yes, it is filled with mostly left-wing progressives and some radicals as well, people who would consider themselves Antifa. Seattle and Portland have long been the homes for this type of politics. It's nothing new. This has been going on since at least the 90s, probably from into the 60s and 70s as well. So for Trump to send troops directly into the cities where Antifa activists or people who like to call themselves Antifa, radical leftists reside and live. I mean, it's just inviting trouble. And I know there's going to be people who are like, yes, this is what I voted for. We're finally sending in, we're going to get rid of all those stupid domestic terrorists and round them up. We're going to take Portland back. But if you believe in decentralization and you believe in bodily autonomy and individual liberty, then why do we need to have the federal government try to enforce their will on every city and every state? Maybe some people want progressive left-wing policies, even if they are destroying their cities with, drugs rampant and crime rampant. Maybe that's what people want. If they keep voting for it, it's not necessarily the Fed's jobs, and we shouldn't allow it. It's not constitutional. It's not legal. It's not moral to go in there and say, okay, well, you're not running your city right. I'm going to force it through troops. Not a good move. Trump announced on Saturday plans to send troops into Portland, saying they would be used to protect federal immigration facilities against, quote, domestic terrorists. So here we go. He's using that language and was also authorizing them to use, quote, full force if necessary. What the fuck does full force mean? Does that mean kill people? Are we about to see, another Kent State where Americans are shot and killed by National Guard troops? And I'm sure some of you would have no sympathy and say, well, those are crazy radical Antifa people. They shouldn't have been out there. But as I've expressed before, personally, I think when tyranny rises, people do need to step in and try to intervene. And ICE is, having ICE marching through the streets and National Guard troops isn't something that most Americans want to see or that they support, even if they're not for, illegal immigration being run rampant. Most people don't want to see troops in the street. So this is, of course, coming after Trump put troops in LA, DC. He threatened Chicago, and then he kind of backed off. And as I said, Chicago is filing a lawsuit. Their lawsuit says that, quote, citing nothing more than baseless, wildly hyperbolic pretext, the president says Portland is a war-ravaged city under siege from domestic terrorists. Defendants have thus infringed on Oregon's sovereign power to manage its own law enforcement activity and National Guard resource. I think that's totally true. And we shouldn't support presidential power being able to step over state power, guys. That's not a good move. And also just think about the language. It's war ravaged, under siege from domestic terrorists. Guys, we're talking about a couple of activists, a handful of activists. I would definitely say less than 10, for sure less than 50 activists who are going to the places where ICE is at and are trying to prevent them from, taking people away. And some of them are going directly to the ICE facilities and protesting outside. That's not a war-ravaged city. It's not under siege. I was in Portland just a couple months ago. Sure, you might have some isolated areas of people doing stuff like that, but the entire city is not under siege by domestic terrorists. It's just complete garbage. And the fact that people are wanting to accept it is not a good step. This article also says that violent crime in Portland has dropped in the first 6 months of 2025, according to preliminary data released by the Major Cities Chiefs Association and its mid-year violent crime report. Homicides fell by 51% compared to the same period a year earlier. And the Pentagon has not responded to a comment, but you do have I think it's the mayor of Portland speaking up, saying, is the Attorney General of Oregon saying sending in 200 National Guard troops to guard a single building is not normal, referring to the ICE facility. And this is, of course, after there have been protests. And there's been protests in Portland for a long time, going back to George Floyd, going back to the cop-free zone. I did reporting all about that. And here's just one more I want to cover for you guys. Arrests decline in Portland ICE protests before Trump deployed troops. So this is just making the point that protests outside of an immigration facility in Portland have waned over the summer, but that's not stopping Trump from sending in troops. And while arrests at the facility drew attention in June, the pace of the arrest and the intensity of the protests declined even before Trump announced they were sending in troops. So things were already kind of calming down. And here's some picture you can see right here on screen for those who are watching, like a standoff between protesters and the ICE officials. And it's interesting. I want to go back to that. Look at this. I mean, you got Humvees coming into a city, an American city. I don't understand how anybody considers themselves conservative or, Republican, constitutionalist, even anything close to libertarian can even say that this is a normal thing. Now, look at these protesters. These aren't necessarily people I would be hanging out with or support. They're masked up 5 years after COVID lies, and exposed. They're wearing gas masks, which is understandable because tear gas has been fired, but they're wearing the freaking COVID mask, and that's just retarded. But I mean, there's kind of battles happening between the cops and between the ICE officials. And look, here's people being violently thrown to the ground and accosted. Like, this is not stuff you should support. And now look, here's people protesting the ICE building. They're climbing onto the walls. I know that some of you generally are going to be like against this completely. And look at that crowd, guys. Look, okay, I said 50. Let's say there's 200 people there, 200 at most. And they're not all definitely getting violent. There's probably a few people in there who are getting violent. Some might be provocateurs. Some are just activists who believe that, they're acting in the right. And you think 200 troops is necessary. It's not a good move. And now let me show you one more story on this one that will maybe make it clear why this is going in the wrong direction. This is from the New York Times. And I know some of you will cry and screech because it's the New York Times, but you can find other sources as well. This is pretty heavily documented. This is a report from just a couple days ago. I'm from here. U.S. citizens are ending up in Trump's dragnet. As immigration agents are taking a more aggressive approach, they have stopped and in some cases detained American citizens. That's all you really need to know. They go into this, they meet some people, including this guy, Brian Gavidia, an American citizen, standing where he was detained by ICE agents in Montebello, California in June. There's more than a handful of examples of this. Here's another guy. Most of them are Hispanic, unfortunately. They're Mexican, they're Latin, and this is him right here, Kenny Lanes Ambrosio. He was filmed officers arresting him during a traffic stop in Florida in May, and so there he is being thrown violently on the ground. For those who are watching. This is the kind of thing you don't want, guys. This is stop and frisk on steroids. So you send in troops to wherever Trump doesn't like or to any city that complains about him. You say that it's all for, fighting immigration, but then you're also normalizing troops on the ground. You're normalizing stop and frisk, just bothering anybody because, they look brown or because maybe they posted something bad on social media. It's not a good move, my friends. We shouldn't be normalizing these kind of situations. I really, really want to invite you guys to rethink this. Again, you can hold two things in your mind at one time. I promise you are a critically thinking, beautiful, powerful, intelligent person. You can be against illegal immigration, and I have my own thoughts as an anarchist that I don't think the government should be in charge of the borders, but that's another conversation for another day. Find more about that at my website if you're interested. But you can be against illegal immigration, and you can also reject the growth of the immigration police state, facial recognition rolling out, ICE using Stingray cell phone surveillance tools, Palantir getting contracts with the government, the growth of the private prison industry that is being paid to build these camps where they're holding people, troops on the ground, stop and frisk policies, bothering people, violating the Fourth Amendment, and all of this. Like, you don't have to support this, and you could still say, well, I'm against illegal immigration, but they're not handling it right, and I don't condone what's happening because it's going to end up biting me in the ass later. So I'm going to stand on principle and recognize that it's not right if the other side does it in the name of terrorism. Think about this. George Bush, Obama, post 9/11. We have to be afraid of Muslims and Islamic terrorists hiding out in all the bushes and jumping out and attacking us. So take away our rights and freedoms. Well, now here we are in 2025, and it's be afraid of the cartel members and the gang members, and be afraid of the illegal immigrants. And we'll promise that we'll keep you safe. Just let us put troops on the ground. Just let us spy on you and monitor you. It's the same old tactics we've seen time and time again, man. And we got to do better than this, my friends. We have to. Let's go ahead and continue now with our second story as we continue looking at the ways that the Trump administration is really destroying the norms of the United States. Now, that's not to say that all the norms are good, but it's definitely taking a step in the wrong direction. This story is going to focus on the way that the Trump administration, specifically the Pentagon under Pete Hegseth, former Fox News host, is starting to restrict what media can report. This one coming from the Associated Press. Pentagon steps up media restrictions, now requiring approval before reporting even unclassified information. The Pentagon says it will require credentialed journalists at the military headquarters to sign a pledge to refrain from reporting information that has not been authorized for release, including unclassified information. Journalists who don't abide by this policy risk losing credentials that provide access to the Pentagon, under a 17-page memo distributed Friday that steps up media restrictions imposed by Trump. The red directive states information must be approved for public release by an appropriate authorizing official before it is released, even if it is unclassified. The signature form includes an array of security requirements for credentialed media at the Pentagon. So not only are they going to try to make it more difficult to become credentialed media at the Department of Defense, at the Pentagon, but they're also now saying, even if you have information that is unclassified, you can't share it unless it has been appropriately authorized by an official for release. And that just goes against everything that journalism is supposed to be about. Advocates for press freedom denounced the non-disclosure requirement as an assault on independent journalism. The new Pentagon restrictions arrive as Trump expands threats, lawsuits, and government pressure as he remakes the American media landscape. And honestly, I just want to say this. I think this is one area that way too many people out there are either not paying attention to or making excuses for it. I include those who are so-called awakened truthers, libertarians, freedom-loving people who just seem to be going soft on Trump. It's not Trump derangement syndrome to call him out for the things he does. And Trump filing lawsuits against media, whether it's CBS, whether it's 60 Minutes, we talked about last week, this whole thing with Jimmy Kimmel. All of these are not good moves. I guarantee you, if it was Obama, Biden, Clinton, or anybody else from the quote other side, many of you would be complaining about it. You would rightfully be complaining and standing up and speaking up against these things. But because it's Trump, a lot of you seem to make excuses. This is not a good move. Putting pressure on the media, allowing the president to get to a place where he can get shows canceled, even if it's just temporarily, or he can file lawsuits against journalistic outlets to try to pressure them to only report the things he wants. That's not a good move, guys. And this, with the Pentagon here now trying to set new rules about what journalists can report and not report, it is also a step in the very bad direction. We had National Press Club President Mike Balsamo say, if the news about our military must be approved by the government, then the public is no longer getting independent reporting. It is getting only what officials want them to see. He said that should alarm every American. And then Pete Hegseth, again, Defense Secretary, said that, quote, the press does not run the Pentagon. The people do. Well, the people should be informed, right? The press is no longer allowed to roam the halls of a secure facility, wear a badge, and follow the rules or go home. Now, I would say this is probably because they are worried about leaks. They're worried about journalists doing their job. And in reality, journalism is always a cat and mouse game between those in power and journalists, because they don't want us to report things that they don't want the public to know. So journalists have a responsibility to develop sources, to try to get leaked information, to work with whistleblowers. And this has been constitutionally, legally protected for decades, for generations, okay? And they are trying to now clamp down on that, which I guess on one hand, from the perspective of the state and the government and the people who clearly in the Trump administration don't want transparency, because this is the exact opposite of transparency. Let's make that clear. They're now trying to say, okay, journalists can't just be walking around and talking to people because they might develop sources. They can't just report information unless we say it has been approved. The Pentagon this year has evicted many news organizations while imposing a series of restrictions on press that include banning reporters from entering wide swaths of the Pentagon without a government escort, areas where the press had access in the past administrations, as it covers the activities of the world's most powerful military. Again, I think this is just them trying to stuff down and protect themselves from any sort of leaks. And you might argue, well, Derrick, that may have been the policy in the past, but it's no good for America, so we need to change it. That's an opinion. It's fine for you to have that opinion, but it's definitely true that they are changing policies that have existed for decades under numerous administrations. On Saturday, the Society of Professional Journalists released a statement saying, this policy reeks of prior restraint, the most egregious violation of press freedom under the First Amendment, and it is a dangerous step towards government censorship. Attempts to silence the press under the guise of security are part of a disturbing pattern of growing government hostility towards transparency and democratic norms. You had some other people speaking up as well. Hopefully you guys have seen this. Like I said, not a good move at all. And then I want to highlight a report coming from our own website, theconsciousresistance.com, done by Don Villa Jr., who is one of our contributors. Pentagon transparency restriction, nothing new for the military industrial complex. And he basically just makes the point that while this is definitely the most aggressive move of its kind, trying to stifle Pentagon reporters, it's actually not anything new if you look at the long history of lying about foreign policy from the American empire. And so he gives some examples into that. I'll just read a little bit here. He says, as far back as one can remember, the federal government has always taken steps to obstruct the reporting of dissenting voices and inconvenient stories that challenge the government's official narrative, such as when in 1862 and subsequent years, the Lincoln administration showed blatant contempt for First Amendment protections of press freedom during the war between the states, arresting and imprisoning journalists and shutting down newspapers in the process. And, that's obviously a long time ago that happened. It happened he talks about things happening during Trump's administration, Obama's administration. We talked about during the second Iraq war. We have lies of weapons of mass destruction, allegations of Iraq involvement, September 11th, false flag attack. And you could go on and on. Of course, them trying to cover up the collateral murder video from WikiLeaks, which was part of the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs, which were leaked by then Bradley Manning. And numerous other incidents. So if you want a little bit more of a history about how the government lies and tries to cover up things, I encourage you to check this out. There's also a link that he shares to a documentary called Bodyguard of Lies, presented by director Dan Krause, which came out September 23rd. It further exposes the 2 decades of deceit, money laundering, and war crimes that have come to define America's longest conflict, talking about the Afghanistan war. So there's more examples there, but the point is, it's not like Trump is the first person to come along and turn the U.S. government and the U.S. military into an opaque institution that doesn't want transparency. This has been going on for some time. They tend to shy away from providing the truth to the people. That's not really in their best interest. Now, I do want to talk about a couple of more elements here under the media aspect before we get to our next report on digital IDs. I'm going to be doing some investigations. I'm going to get back to writing starting next week in October for The Last American Vagabond. And one of the first things I have, I'll just go ahead and tease it here for you guys. One of the first things I have is a new 3-part investigation that I'm working on. Let me go ahead and pull this up real quick so I can share it with you guys. Thanks again for being here, everybody. It's going to be called something like the Trump administration and technocracy, something more cool than that. But it's going to be a 3-part investigation that looks at the public-private partnerships that the Trump administration has been participating in. If you haven't noticed or again heard, because there's just been so much going on, the Trump administration bought a 10% stake in the NVIDIA company, which is basically like moving closer to merging government and corporations together. Of course, he had this big meeting with the big tech overlords a couple of weeks ago. That's one big example of how the whole thing that so many people were fighting against years ago, the World Economic Forum, public-private partnerships, that's exactly what Donald Trump's doing. And then under the media grab, this will be part 2 of my investigation. We're going to talk about Larry Ellison, who's the head of Oracle, ties to the CIA, ties to Israel, and how he's basically, him and his son are now taking over CBS. And as I'm about to show in this next little report here, he's being given, Larry Ellison is being given TikTok under this deal to save TikTok that Trump is doing. And then, of course, we had this new rule that I just covered, the Department of Defense trying to restrict what can be reported by journalists. So in many ways, the Trump administration is clamping down on the media landscape far worse than we ever saw from Obama or anybody else. This was the executive order just last week, saving TikTok while protecting national security. And again, this is where he's saying, like, we need to protect TikTok from China, and we need to force the company to divest from China, and it's going to be handed over to Larry Ellison. All of this will be in the show notes, of course. Here's an essay from somebody at the New York Times. It says, the billionaire Trump supporter who will soon own the news. And this is talking about TikTok. It's talking about Larry Ellison he's already been a major shareholder in CBS and Paramount, and now CNN, HBO, and a major share of TikTok are also in his sights. And if all goes anticipated, this tech billionaire, already one of the richest men in the world and a founder of Oracle, is poised at 81 years old to become the most powerful media and entertainment mogul in the United States. And so I will include that link in there. And like I said, I'll be doing a new investigation for The Last American Vagabond very soon to break that all down. But the last piece on the media angle here I want to discuss is something relating to an organization called the Public Integrity Section. And I've only recently become familiar with this. I'm sure some people would say the Public Integrity Section of the US government, which sounds like such a bland, innocuous, vague name, public integrity section. Like that sounds like something that people don't pay attention to. I'm sure some people might say this organization, this institution in the US government was wasteful, or it was, spying on people, or was promoting censorship. It may have been. Like I said, I'm not an expert in the history and everything that this institution has done, but based on what I'm seeing here, and I've got 5 reports pulled up, the public integrity section at the very least was supposed to be about corruption and identifying corruption. So you have this one Democratic politician here, Sheldon Whitehouse, U.S. Senator for Rhode Island. This is back in March, demanding answers from the Justice Department on dismantling of the public integrity section. He said that he sent a letter requesting information from Pam Bondi, Attorney General, about the Department of Justice's, quote, dismantling of its public integrity section. So the public integrity section, we're just going to say PIS from now on, is under the DOJ. And this Democratic politician, Sheldon Whitehouse, says, quote, any move that further weakens the public integrity section would signal that the Trump Department of Justice intends not to protect the American people against corruption. Created in response to Watergate, the PIS exists to ensure that the DOJ fairly and thoroughly investigates corruption by government officials at the federal, state, and local level without regard to those officials' political views or allegiances. This section has steadfastly pursued justice against both Democrats and Republicans. And so this came in response to the Department of Justice getting rid of 30 different, they took the PIS, which had 30 prosecutors supposed to go after corruption, to just 5 prosecutors after Trump took office. And so the quote continues, in less than 3 months since President Trump took office, the Department of Justice has taken multiple overt steps to undermine the fight against corruption at home and abroad. The department has disbanded anti-kleptocracy working groups dedicated to combating foreign corruption linked with drug cartels and transnational criminal organizations, halted nearly all enforcement of a law prohibiting bribery of foreign officials by U.S. companies, and limiting the scope of another law requiring the registration of lobbyists for foreign countries. Additionally, Trump has pardoned one former governor convicted of trying to sell U.S. Senate and a former state senator convicted of illegally using campaign funds. If the Trump's administration's goal was to encourage corruption and abuse at the office, it's hard to know what it would do differently. So it's basically saying, like, look, they're every step they're taking is designed to promote corruption, in fact, not actually stop this corruption. So I want to go here, though, to look at one of the reporting. Trump pardons Rod Blagojevich, if you guys remember him, former Illinois governor. Ex-Tennessee lawmaker announces pardon from Trump 2 weeks into prison time. I don't even remember seeing these stories, but this is just kind of an example. And this is the ways that Trump honestly acts like a mob boss. Like, if you donated his campaign, if you supported him, if you scratched his back, then he's going to come to your aid. Here we go. So we got, oops, did I copy it wrong? The links aren't showing up, but nevertheless, you can find them out there. Trump pardons Rod Blagojevich. I remember this guy from back in the day. Former Illinois governor, was the latest overture between the president and the former governor, who is still known in Chicago simply as Blagojevich. So he got a pardon from Trump. Another one got his sentence commuted. That's part of Trump getting rid of this public integrity section at the DOJ. Here's more reports. DOJ may waive key review for elected officials' prosecutions. Back in May, the Department of Justice is considering allowing prosecutors to bypass consultation with the PIS as they pursue charges against elected officials. In doing so, the Trump administration would cut a key review from a team of prosecutors who specialize in bringing cases against public officials. A team also assembled to help ensure charges aren't brought for political reasons. So this is just another way they're trying to reduce the power of this public integrity section. Like I said, have they been involved in corruption? I would guess. It's part of the government. Have they done some good things? It sounds like they are supposed to exist to go after Democrats and Republicans when they are corrupt. And it sounds like it was created post-Watergate because of Richard Nixon's actions. So I'm sure there's some bad and I'm sure there's some good. Overall, though, the Trump administration wants to get rid of it so that they can just act free without any, even the slightest bit of prosecution coming after their actions. It says the potential shift comes at a time when Trump administration members have floated cases against several officials. A Justice Department official confirmed the move, saying it would be a shift from centralizing all authority in the PIS. Justice manual provisions for several sections are under review. No final decisions have been made. The point of the review is to ensure that equal responsibility is held in the field. The potential change would leave U.S. attorneys across the country free to pursue cases against elected officials, and some Trump nominees have already threatened to do so. So in some ways, this is just going to allow Trump to continue the lawfare that he wants to do. Now, he complained about it when the Democrats do it, and now he's like, no, we have to do it. Here's some more. This is back in June, how Trump defanged the Justice Department's political corruption watchdog. This is from Reuters. Created after the Watergate scandal, the DOJ's Public Integrity Section has fought political corruption for nearly half a century. 5 months into Trump's second term, it has been stripped of power. The unit has lost its authority to file new cases. It has been reduced from more than 30 attorneys to 5. And its once powerful gatekeeping role, reviewing potential cases against members of Congress, has been suspended. Those changes, confirmed by 3 people familiar with the operations, are part of an overhaul at the DOJ by the Trump administration that is dismantling guardrails designed to stop interference and criminal investigations involving politicians, federal judges, and other public figures. Reuters reviewed the PIS's cases and internal memos and conducted more than 15 interviews to document the decimation of an office with a mission to investigate and prosecute corruption allegations at all levels of government. So clearly, they are trying to do what they can to limit the power of this organization, which is designed to go after corruption. There's more. Here's one from September. This is from ranking member Jamie Raskin of the House Committee on the Judiciary, ran by the Democrats. Under Kash Patel, the FBI is covering up Trump's relationship with Epstein, sacking experienced counterterrorism agents and endangering public safety. And I think that this is, they kind of give their own, I think they give their own examples of how the Public Integrity Section has been weakened. Here you go. Says Jerry Nadler. Let me make sure I got this right. The Public Integrity Section has been one of the crown jewels of the DOJ, investigating and prosecuting corruption among the nation's public officials and acting as the key safeguard against politicized prosecution. But according to reports, the Public Integrity Section has now been decimated and the FBI's Public Corruption Squad has been disbanded. Why would the Trump administration want to get rid of organizations that are aimed at corruption within government? Unless they want to protect their friends like Epstein and others. Here's another one from the outlet Notice. The Justice Department had 36 lawyers fighting corruption full time. Under Trump, it's down to 2. So the others said 5. This one's a little more recent, September 22nd. So this is about a week old. And they're claiming there's literally only 2 attorneys left in this institution. Clearly, they're not going to be able to do the work that 36 experienced attorneys previously did. All of the links to this about the Public Integrity Section will be in the show notes. And if you haven't heard about this, guys, please do spread the word. I'm going to make sure we put out a clip later on this week specifically about this Public Integrity Section thing, because I hadn't heard about it. And I think this is part of the strategy of the Trump administration to, quote, flood the zone, to make things happen so rapidly. We just keep being hit by one controversy after another. And they're sending troops over here. Epstein, they're lying about this. Oh, and the Charlie Kirk thing. And it's just one thing after another. And I don't even mean just from the Predator class, but from the Trump administration. They want to use a strategy that keeps the people constantly fighting many different battles. And while we're fighting over here, they do something over here, and on and on and on and on. And it makes it difficult for us to keep up. That's part of their strategy. That's how they want to win. And we have to do everything we possibly can to push back, to out-organize them, because that's the thing is we outnumber these people. We are just out-organized. They are much more effective, much more thoughtful and meticulous in their planning. They have meetings of all kinds. They put out white papers, think tanks. They map out the coming years. And that's something that we, the free, beautiful people, have been lacking for so long. So we need to get more organized. We need to push back against this media takeover by the billionaire technocrats. We need to push back against the DOJ trying to limit what journalists can do, and push back against government becoming more corrupt. Because guess what, guys? It didn't start with Donald Trump, and it's going to continue long after Donald Trump. Because here's the big secret. Government is corrupt. It's an immoral, impractical, broken institution. And as long as we keep putting human beings in there and expecting them to rule over us and be angels, we're going to end up in this situation because, well, we have to evolve past it. At least it's my belief that we have to, those of us who can see and who are capable of sovereignty and self-ownership and personal responsibility, evolve past this need for a governing authority, an imposed authority, central authority on our lives, and instead be examples of free, powerful, beautiful people. And this is why I love working with Civil, guys. I want to remind you guys again, this show is now brought to you by Civil. It's civil.com, civl.com. They have all kinds of documentaries. They've got my content. In fact, if you like watching my content and you want to go watch the Pyramid of Power documentary series, you want to see some behind the scenes stuff I did with G. Edward Griffin, with James Corbett. I think I've got some behind the scenes stuff with David Icke, and of course, the Pyramid of Power. Then you need to go check out Civil, civl.com/TCR. That's the best place to get plugged in. You can learn more about my work and everything I'm doing there, guys, because this is a streaming platform and a podcasting network that allows you to find content that's not going to flood your mind with all kinds of propaganda that you might find in Netflix and some of those other places, but you can also join this platform. You can support my work, support them, and you can learn things. You can watch documentaries, you can listen to podcasts. Cool thing about it that I like is that for those of you who still have TVs, you can watch through the Roku app, through Apple TV, through the Fire Stick. I don't have those things, so they're kind of, a little bit out of my expertise, but you can download the Civil app onto your tablet, onto your phone. You can, watch pretty much anywhere you want, tablet, phone, TV. And that means you don't have to rely on YouTube to get my content. You don't have to go to my own website. You can go there. You can watch the Conscious Resistance live every week on Civil. You can watch my documentaries as they get released. You can check out my podcast. You can check out interviews. We're going to be doing some exclusive content very soon for Civil. It's all very exciting, and I'm so grateful to be working with them on that. So one more time, civil.com/TCR, civl.com/TCR. And if you do want to sign up for an annual subscription, which let's just scroll down real quick, it's not that expensive at all. You can get full access to everything for $50 a year. And you can use the coupon TCR20 to get 20% off your annual subscription. And they even do a $5 a month thing if you want to have limited access, but you don't get everything, but you still want to sign up and support. You can do $5 a month. But the coupon code TCR20, it only works if you sign up for the once a year, $50 a year subscription. And I hope you guys will do so, because Civil's supporting me. And by you supporting them, you support me. We all support each other, and we keep growing, and we build that better world that we know is possible. And we upgrade human civilization, because I know that's what you guys are after. That's what I'm after. So please do check out Civil at civil.com/TCR. All right, we've got two more stories to cover tonight. And this one, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, I told you so. I told you this was going to happen, and not me because I've got some crystal ball, but because I've been writing about technocracy. You can see my book back here, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, which you can download for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to, theconsciousresistance.com/how-to, free audiobook, free PDF. Spanish, French, German, etc. Find it there. I've been warning people since 2019 and since 2020 when I published this book that technocracy was on the rise, it was on the march, and that we needed to start to think about this. We first learned about things like digital IDs, social credit scores, facial recognition because of the ways they were used during COVID 1984. But myself and plenty of other people were saying, guys, just because the COVID, scamdemic is over doesn't mean that the agenda's over. We still have Agenda 2030. We still have the Great Reset. We still have the Summit of the Future that took place last year and the Pact of the Future. All of these programs are about pushing digital IDs. And that might come in the form of a vaccine passport, or it could be pushed to have, your carbon score. So this is going to help us reduce climate change. The point is that the people that wish they were in control, the so-called powers that wish they were, they are going to push their agenda any different way they can. And as I've been telling you for years, they're going to use entertainment, they're going to use convenience, and of course, they're going to use fear to sell it to the masses. And lo and behold, here we are, and the United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer, just this last week, reveals digital ID plan after admitting that the Labour Party shied away from illegal immigration concerns. Prime Minister says it's now essential to tackle every aspect of the problem of illegal immigration. And wouldn't you guess it, they're going to use the fears of illegal immigrants and illegal immigration to bring in the digital IDs. Like I said, it might be about fears of pandemics. It could be about fears of climate change or fears of the other, the illegal immigrant. One way or the other, they're going to push this agenda. Sir Keir Starmer has unveiled a plan for a digital ID scheme after admitting that Labour has previously shied away. Quote, you will not be able to work in the UK if you don't have a digital ID. It's as simple as that. He said the scheme would make it, quote, tougher to work illegally in this country, making our borders more secure. It would require anyone starting a job or renting a home to show it on their phone, which would then be checked against a database of those entitled to work and live here. The plan sees digital IDs becoming mandatory for the right to work by the end of this parliament. This is not 10 years from now. This is happening very quickly. The Prime Minister wrote in the Daily Telegraph, let's open up that article today, that it was now, quote, essential to tackle every aspect of the problem of illegal immigration. Quote, there is no doubt that for years, left-wing parties, including my own, did shy away from people's concerns around illegal immigration. It's called the Brit card. And there's a little, for those watching on screen, there's some examples. You got a gentleman named James Williams. They scan it. Yeah, he has a right to work, permanent. He has a right to rent, permanent. He's over 18. Cool. Here's his driver's license. The one app to rule them all. Workers currently have to show at least one form of physical ID, but there are concerns these can be faked. Here it is. That's all about, trying to make us safe. Prime Minister said the scheme would, quote, offer ordinary citizens countless benefits, making it easier to apply for services such as driver's license, childcare, and welfare. A consultation will look at how the scheme would work for those who may not have a smartphone, such as older people or homeless people. Don't worry, we're going to get them into the banking system, get them into digital ID, and eventually chipped in no time. French President Emmanuel Macron has repeatedly warned that the lack of ID cards acts as a major pull for channel crossings as immigrants feel they can find work in the black economy, the black market. Guess what? That's where we want to be. That's what agorism is all about. That's what exit and build is all about. There is strength in being outside of their systems. And don't you see the messages? Stay inside the system. Be inside the system, because guess what? Inside the systems, they can control you. They can't control you if you're outside, if you don't need their systems. So if you don't need their work, you don't need their rent, which I get is a big task, but it's one we need to focus on, then you can live outside. And here they even talk about it. Starmer said on Friday's Global Progress Action Summit, quote, it had been too easy for people to come here, slip into the shadow economy, and remain here illegally. It is not compassionate left-wing politics to rely on labor that exploits foreign workers and undercuts fair wages. But the simple fact is that every nation needs to have control over its borders. And I know some people say that. They're like, the illegal immigrants are harming me. They're making me lose wages. You know what? Sorry, but people who operate outside of the system, they're just doing what they have to do. And like I said, I advocate, even if you're not a foreigner in a different country, if you're not an illegal immigrant, work outside of the system as much as you can, deal in cash, try to not report taxes where you can. That's what agorism and exit and build is all about, being in the black and gray markets and building the counter economies, the counter institutions, the parallel systems that these people are afraid of. That's why they're talking about the shadow economy, because they know that they can try to control you within the system, and they want as many people plugged into that system as possible. You have Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy told Sky News, for people who come here and want to work, it will be compulsory to show it, the digital ID. For all other UK citizens, it will be compulsory to have it, but not to show it. People will be able to choose whether they use it or not. Yeah, but how long before they say, well, I can't tell if you're an illegal immigrant or if you're a Brit, so you got to show it no matter what. I mean, this is obviously going in the bad direction. It goes on from there. Let me show a couple more headlines here. This is Keir Starmer writing in the Telegraph. The left ignored immigration fears for too long. It's time to give control back to communities. Only a plan for a patriotic national renewal led by labor will counter the rise of the populist right, he says. So this is him writing his article calling on the leftists to embrace digital ID. And this is another one. Keir Starmer announces digital ID plan. He hopes the smartphone-based Brit card will reduce the attractiveness of the UK for potential illegal immigrants. The Brit card. Where have I heard that before, guys? Oh yeah, that was back in June on the Conscious Resistance Live 156 called You're Falling for the PSYOP Again. And my fourth story of that show, or the third story, was the Brit card, UK digital ID proposal. So they've been talking about this for months now. It's just finally got to the point where they're actually rolling it out. Here, let me go ahead and open up this link. The Brit Card, a progressive digital ID for Britain, how well-designed digital credentials can help tackle illegal migration. June 2025. So here we are, September, July, August. It only took 3 months from them putting out this white paper that most people didn't even pay any attention to, for them to now announce that it's happening. Digital ID is going to be mandatory. And I've been posting in the UK Freedom Cell. And for those who remember, we did a People's Reset back in the UK. And I've been reaching out to my friends and saying like, hey guys, what are your plans? What are you going to do to to fight this? How are you going to make sure that this doesn't become a mandatory thing? Or if it is mandatory, how are you going to make sure that you can survive and thrive outside of their system? Because to me, that is the key. I don't think we can necessarily stop it from happening. Right now is the time. If you guys are in the UK and you want there to be a mass uprising, you want to prevent this, you need to start organizing protests and marches as big as you saw during COVID 1984. Flood the streets, flood the parliament, go out there and make it clear you're not going to embrace this. Is that going to happen? I don't know. I hope so. I pray so. But what if it doesn't? What if nobody resists this? Like we don't see much resistance to the facial recognition cameras at the United States airports and elsewhere. Then what do we do? For me, the answer is exit and build. And I want to remind you guys about my 45-day exit and build challenge, which is completely free. You can go to theconsciousresistance.com/EXB. Again, all the links are in the show notes. This was a challenge I did last year about this time, leading up to the US election, and basically trying to tell people there are different ways to survive outside of their systems. We talked about food, we talked about money, we talked about technology, land, education and knowledge, mindset and habits, and how to think holistically about this. And a lot of people are still emailing me and telling me that this has been useful for them and that they're getting something out of learning about exit and build and then applying it to their lives. So how can you use exit and build when digital IDs are becoming mandatory? For one, stop using their banks. I know that's scary for some of you, but stop using their banks. Your money is safer stuffed in a mattress in your home or using a local credit union. But even the credit unions are eventually going to go along with the same digital ID schemes. Deal in cash as much as possible. Try to work jobs where they don't take your money and directly deposit it into a bank. Receive the check to your hands and go to a check cashing place. I don't know in the UK, but I know for sure in the US, there's like these check cashing places. Sometimes they'll charge you 1% or 3% or 5%. And yes, it sucks to have to deal with that. But those places, they might ask for an ID, but they're not asking for digital IDs right now. So that's a step in the right direction. This is what exit and build is about. It's not about becoming completely unplugged from the matrix overnight. It's about taking concrete steps and starting where you're at and then moving in the right direction. So let's say they're going to require digital IDs to work and to rent. And you say, Derrick, I don't know what to do. I don't have the perfect solution, but I know that the answer is to not be dependent on their systems. So find jobs that are willing to work under the table. Find jobs that are willing to pay you in cash. Find community. That's really what it comes down to. That's what I talk about in this, that community is vital and important, guys. I have an eco village that Miriam and I are building out here in Mexico, but we couldn't do this on our own. So we're working with 8 to 10 other households, couples, individuals, families, to build the community that we want, the community of our dreams, because we know that it's going to take effort, it's going to take time, and we can't do it alone. So we have to work together. So I encourage you guys, learn more about the exit and build idea. This is so vital, so important, because digital IDs are coming and we might not be able to stop it, especially if there's not mass resistance. But at the very least, we need to be able to survive and thrive outside of their systems. And to do that, you need to lessen your dependence on those systems yesterday, as quick as possible, as soon as possible, as humanly possible. That's what you need to do. That, to me, is the answer. Mass resistance, non-compliance, and focusing on building parallel systems. You heard them. They're worried about people living in the shadow economy or in the black economy. Well, maybe that's the answer. The answer is to be outside of their systems and outside of their hands, so we're not dependent on the tyrannical, technocratic state that they're building. Of course, if you want to learn more about this, you can go to my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, and download it at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. Guys, before we cover our last story about the Utah ritual abuse investigation, I wanted to remind you about the People's Reset 2026 coming up January 28th to February 1st in Morelia, Mexico, where I live right here in the beautiful mountains of Morelia. It is a 5-day solutions-focused activation where we talk about mental, physical, spiritual health, permaculture, how to grow food. We talk about building parallel systems, how to get into that shadow economy we were just talking about. We talk about using privacy-based, decentralized, open source technology. And we also talk about building free and conscious communities, how you can learn from other people who are already living in communities, and whether you want to buy land and do a homestead, or you're living in the city and you're just looking for some more ideas and resources. This is the event for you guys. thepeoplesreset.org is the website. You can watch the entire event online for free all 5 days, and I highly encourage you to. But the best thing to do is to come in person. We are going to get 400 plus people from more than a dozen countries. We've got 30 speakers, including Alex Zeck from The Way Forward, Carrie Wedler, we've got Sterling Lujan, Catherine Austin Fitz, so many other great people, some you've never heard of who are doing great work, and others who you'll be more familiar with. We've also got performers like Natalie Rise, Dub FX. We've got some Mexican artists. We've got underground artists coming. There's family and kids activities. There's going to be an art gallery. It's indoor and outdoor. It's an amazing time. So if you're living somewhere in the winter and it's freezing come January, late January, February, you want to get out of that, come to the People's Reset. I'm going to play you guys a real quick clip of just our little promo from 2025 so you can get an idea of what we're all about. Check it out here.
Our power is in our voice. Our power is in our thoughts. Our power is in our actions. Our power, it's already innate in who we are. We are the earth. We are the sky. We are the trees. We are our ancestors. We are the future generations. We are all that is.
I know we talk a lot about problems here, guys, but I put a lot of effort and time and energy, as well as Miriam and our small team, to create that event. And it's honestly a life-changing, transformative, paradigm-shifting event. So if you're tired of just sitting behind your computer screen, your phone screen, you want to meet hundreds of other like-minded people where you can, take off the mask, metaphorical and maybe physical, and just be yourself, come to the People's Reset. Again, January 28th to February 1st. Go to the website, check out the speaker lineup, get your tickets right now. They're only 188 USD for all 5 days. Tickets go up on November 1st. So check it out there. And I hope to see you guys in January here in Morelia. Okay, the final story of the night, guys. This is one I've been wanting to do for a while. I sort of touched on it a little bit last week, but now we're going to dive fully into it. For those of you who are aware or not aware, I've been investigating this Utah ritual abuse case, this investigation, since 2020 when it was first announced. You can go to find all of my articles at The Last American Vagabond under my name, Utah Ritualized Sexual Abuse Investigation. And you can find dozens and dozens of reports I've done about the history of Utah ritual abuse in general, as well as within the Mormon Church, and just all kinds of crazy stuff that I encourage you to check out. We first started reporting on this. This was back in, I think it was May 2020 when it was first announced. The Utah County Sheriff's, June 2022. So it happened in May 2022 when the county sheriffs out there in Utah said that they were investigating ritualized child sex abuse. And I'm not going to recap everything as it's not fully relevant to what we're talking about today. So I do encourage you to go back to see my previous articles and videos about this, which you can find at The Last American Vagabond and theconsciousresistance.com. But I wanted to highlight this article. This was the third article I wrote back in June 2022. Utah Ritualized Sexual Abuse Investigation. David Levitt under investigation for suspicion of human trafficking. So let me get you up to speed. This man right here, for those who are watching on screen, back in 2022, he was the Utah County Attorney. Obviously, as an attorney, he's involved with investigating crimes. And when this announcement by the Utah County Sheriffs about investigating ritualized sexual abuse came about, David Levitt, very oddly, held a press conference where he said, my wife and I kid you not, guys, he said, my wife and I are not involved in child trafficking. We're not involved in cannibalism or anything like that. And most of the journalists in the media were like, what are you talking about? And he said that he believed him and his wife were going to be accused of such crimes as part of the sheriff's investigation into ritualized sexual abuse. And so I don't want to get too lost in the weeds, but I want you to stay focused with me here for a moment. So this guy, David Levitt, his father, Dixie Levitt, former governor of Utah. He's also part of the Levitt Insurance Company, I believe it is. They are a very powerful family, not only in Utah, but around the country. And most people don't know anything about them, especially if you're not in Utah. But for those who are in Utah, you understand very clearly the power of the Levitt family, as well as the Mormon Church itself, which David Levitt, like many people in Utah, is a part of. And so David Levitt accused the sheriff's office of playing politics. He said that the investigation they announced was just about trying to make him look bad so he could lose his election that he was running at the time. So David Levitt comes out and he says, as I mentioned, he says in his press conference that he was not guilty of ritual sexual abuse. He was not guilty of cannibalism. And he claimed that this investigation was going to target him. And he shared a 151-page document titled Victim Statement relating to a 2012 case against a man named David Hamblin, a therapist, for sexually abusing his own children as well as others. And the general accusation is that David Levitt, the county attorney, as well as David Hamblin, the therapist, are a part of a network, what some people call the Church of Satan, within the Mormon church. And I know that might be really crazy sounding to some of you, but that's what they apparently call themselves. The only reason we know about this is because there are hundreds and hundreds of pages of these alleged victims who were young girls at the time, describing everything from rape to murder to witnessing people wearing the skin of other dead people on their bodies while they raped and abused young girls, to praying to Lucifer, all kinds of crazy stuff. Now, David Levitt, the county attorney, he has never officially been charged with anything related to that, but he went and stuck his foot in his mouth, and he got himself kind of a target by saying, hey, I have nothing to do with this. So now this is where it gets a little interesting, and this is where I want your help. I reported on this in the past, like I said, that, let me go back, pull that article one time. So now that I've given you a little bit about who he is, he was actually accused of being involved in human trafficking. Now, let me find that part here. So this was back in 2022. Fox 13, which there was a journalist there named Adam Herberts, who was actually doing good work. Fox 13 reported that David Levitt may have been implicated in an adoption scheme turned human trafficking investigation. The Fox 13 Investigates team released a video of then Utah County Attorney David Levitt discussing how he used his political influence to work around the laws to adopt a Native American girl. In the video, David Levitt says that he brokered a deal with the Northern Cheyenne tribe in Montana by telling them that he could help them sell some of their buffalo to Ukraine. So there's also this very weird Ukrainian connection there. David Levitt says he went to Ukraine and he told the chief of the Northern Cheyenne tribe, hey, if you let me have this native girl as part of an adoption, I'll help you, broker a buffalo deal with the Ukrainians. David Levitt in the video says he struck the deal with tribal leadership and was eventually able to convince them to allow the adoption. The little girl is now considered to be David Levitt's step foster great niece, so in his family. Fox 13 reports that the video was recorded by a documentary filmmaker in 2020 and has since been submitted to Homeland Security investigations as part of a criminal human trafficking investigations. Fox 13 dropped another bombshell involving a Homeland Security investigation against David Levitt. So this is the man that I'm looking for. His name is Noel Angles, a former analyst with the Homeland Security Investigations. He told Fox 13 Investigations that his team had been investigating sexual allegations against David Levitt for several years. So, like I said, the original reason David Levitt's even brought up is because he was listed in one of the documents in this separate case about David Hamblin, the therapist who his own daughters say he abused. And they say that David Levitt, the county attorney, former county attorney now, as well as his own wife, Shalom Levitt, were involved in this ritualistic abuse of children. And at the same time, you got Noel Angles, who was at the Homeland Security investigations, saying that they've been investigating David Levitt for years. Angles said that his team had received the video where Levitt talks about the adoption, and that they added it to the case file on Levitt as part of their human trafficking investigation. However, 5 months after they received the video, Noel Angles and his team were removed from the case. He filed a whistleblower complaint, and he received a letter from the U.S. Office of Special Counsel in response. The letter from Attorney John Yu Young states, "You allege that HSI improperly terminated an investigation into the allegations against current Utah attorney David Levitt. We emphasize that while the Office of Special Counsel has found a substantial likelihood of wrongdoing based on the information you submitted, our referral to the Secretary for Investigation is not a final determination that allegations are substantiated. This remains an open matter." So basically they're saying, look, we think you may have found a substantial likelihood of wrongdoing, but we're still investigating it. And nevertheless, he says he was wrongfully terminated. He basically says he was removed from the case. And here is where you can see, this is the Fox 13 report. Video raises questions about Utah County attorney adoption of Native American child. Video was entered into evidence as part of human trafficking investigation at David Levitt. And if you want to see this, again, it'll be in the show notes. And you can hear him. It's a 17-minute clip where he's clearly talking to myself. He says, quote, "I'm thinking to myself, how in the world am I going to do this? Finally, the strategy comes into my head. And if you've got 5 minutes, I'll tell you the story." He's talking to a documentary filmmaker, and he's just an idiot and decides that this is a great thing to tell people. He says he met with the tribal president, and he says, quote, "And I say to him, I'm here for 2 reasons. I said, I'm here to tell you the second reason first, but I'll tell you the first reason second. But before I tell you the second reason, I'll tell you a story." What the hell? I don't know. This guy's talking in circles. David Levitt talks about the importance of family, and he highlighted his close friendship with former Ukrainian president Viktor Yushchenko. "Victor and I have this goal of introducing buffalo into Western Ukraine," he recounted. "And you're a sovereign nation," talking to the tribe, "and you have a buffalo herd. And Ukraine is a sovereign nation, and it doesn't have a buffalo herd, but it wants one. So I'm here to see if we can form a bilateral agreement with the people of the Northern Cheyenne and the people of Ukraine to introduce buffalo to Western Ukraine." He says, "At this point, the chief was all ears. And I said, that's the second reason why I'm here. The first reason why I'm here is this. We want to adopt one of your people." And he said that the chief gave him the blessing. He said, but tribal social services did not. And then David Levitt continues, "Tribal social services looked at us and said, we're not giving you this baby. I just said, you know what? You are shameless. I just let her have it with both barrels. There's such a prejudice in the Native community about a non-Native adopting a Native." Yes, because that's the history, because of the history of colonization and of people, white Americans taking Natives from their families just because they want to, play Native and have a look at us. We got a little token Native baby. And he's sitting there, "Oh, I gave it to her with both barrels. You're shameless because you won't give me this baby." He says in a last-ditch effort, he went back to the tribal president, and he said the president of the tribe said, "Listen, the Levitts are friends of the tribe. They're assets to the tribe for more than just this." I left, and 5 minutes later, the phone rang, and it was a social worker saying, "I think I figured out a way to get this child to you." David Levitt said he took home the child that same day in 2017, and the chief himself has declined to comment. At the time of the 2020 interview, he was in prison for fraud in an unrelated case. So David Levitt goes to this tribal president, Jace Killsback, and says, "I'll trade some buffalo to Ukraine for you. You guys can get some money. You help me get this baby." And that's child trafficking. That's violating the laws around adopting Native children. That's also quid pro quo. And that is what got Noel Angles, the Homeland Security investigator, in trouble. Let's check this out. Noel Angles used to be an analyst with Homeland Security Investigations, HSI. His team had been investigating sexual allegations against David Levitt for several years. Upon receiving the video describing the adoption, they investigated Levitt for human trafficking. And for those on screen, here's the picture. You can kind of see, this is the only picture I've been able to find of this Noel Angles, the Homeland Security investigator. Again, they show the letter he received after he claims he was wrongfully terminated. And yeah, that's basically, so I reported on all that back in 2022. Everything I just shared with you was known back in 2022. And I don't think I quite understood the importance of this man, Noel Angles, how he was leading the investigation against David Levitt, the former Utah County attorney, who not only we know for certain was involved in a illegal adoption of a Native American girl, but was implicated and accused of everything from child abuse, rape, murder, and cannibalism in the related case against David Hamblin, which unfortunately David Hamblin, the charges against him were dropped for a second time in over a decade just earlier this year because there's no justice in Utah. I started to dig back into this whole story. I hope you guys are with me and this is making sense. And then I found this interview from the Whistleblower Network News. I'd never heard of it, whistleblowersblog.org. It's a podcast and a website dedicated to helping whistleblowers. And it's run by a woman named Jane Turner, who herself used to be a whistleblower. This was recorded July 2024, so more than a year old. And I want you to download this podcast, guys, because as I started to investigate this, the podcast disappeared for a couple of months and then it popped back up. Thankfully, I saved it. And for some reason, it's now back on their website. I don't know what to make of that. And I've emailed Jane Turner. I've emailed everybody at the Whistleblower Network News asking if they can put me in touch with with Noel Angles, who is the former investigator for Homeland Security Investigations. I've also found him as an advisor on a film company. I've emailed them. I've tried everything I can do to find him, and I am in the process of tracking down his phone number and his location to try to reach out to him. My guess is he's trying to quietly disappear into the shadows, but that's not enough. That's not good enough. Mr. Angles, if you happen to hear this, I might be a small-time independent journalist, but your voice can ring strong and true if you speak up and if you help us break the story about what David Levitt is up to. In this episode of the Whistleblower of the Week podcast, host Jane Turner speaks with Noel Angles. After spending over 2 decades working for the U.S. government intelligence, law enforcement, and military combat operations, Angles left his role as a criminal analyst at the DHS after filing a whistleblower complaint. He claims he was improperly removed from investigation into human trafficking against Utah County Attorney David Levitt. He and Turner discussed the shocking details of the case and the retaliation that he faced for speaking up. Highly encourage you guys to listen to this interview with Noel Angles. I do know that he is apparently living in Portland, Maine, or at least that's one of his locations. And I want to make it clear, I'm not asking you guys to go harass him or anything of that sort. Please do not harass this man. He is a whistleblower, and we need whistleblowers to feel like they can come out and speak up. But if you happen to hear this, Mr. Angles, I'm trying to reach you. I'm sure you've seen the emails by now. I'm sure your colleagues have told you that I've reached out to the Whistleblower Network News, and I've reached out to the film company where you're an advisor. I am trying to see if you are willing to come forward. I recognize you might be concerned for your safety or your privacy, and I completely empathize with that. But we need people like you to speak up, to be a voice, because unfortunately, in my work, I've investigated similar cases like the case of the Finders cult, and there is a Department of Homeland Security customs agent, Ramon Martinez, who knows the truth about the Finders, but he is also unwilling to speak publicly. And if people like you don't speak up publicly, these stories are going to continue to go on and we'll never get to the truth. So please, Mr. Angles, if you hear this, if somebody knows him, reach out to me. Let's talk off the record, on the record, whatever you're willing to share. Give me some clues, give me some tips so I can keep digging into this, because right now, David Levitt is walking free, and the young Native girl is not with her family based on an illegal adoption. And in fact, there is reports of her family saying they want her back. The last thing I want to say on this case, let me just go ahead and change back over here, is that another reason this is important for you to come forward, Mr. Angles, and I'm sure you're aware of this, that David Levitt and his wife, Shalom, are just walking free. After he lost the Utah County Attorney election, he moved to Scotland. And now they have 1.1 million followers on Instagram at Knockderry Castle. They moved to Scotland. And it says, we're following our dream of restoring a castle. Follow along as we uncover the magic of Knockderry Castle. And you can see video and pictures. There's David Levitt right there on screen. And him and his wife, they moved to Scotland. They bought this castle with all their wealth, and they're doing a remodel. And now they've got friends and people, followers all over the world following their journey to keep up with this. And those people have no idea who they really are. So again, on Instagram, that's Knockderry Castle. I'll put it in the show notes. That's Knock, K-N-O-C-K, Knockderry Castle. Go comment on there if you can and ask them, hey, Mr. Levitt, what happened to the Native American girl you adopted? Hey, Mr. Levitt, why are you under investigation for human trafficking? This guy should not be allowed to just go on there and become a freaking, remodeling a house, remodeling a castle influencer. We need to do better than that. And unfortunately, the dude is still walking free. So thank you guys so much for being here tonight. And I'm so glad that I finally got to cover that Utah story in addition to everything else, because I've been wanting to talk about that for a while. I'm trying not to scare Mr. Noel Angles away, so I've been hesitant to talk about this publicly, but I think it's important. And perhaps if he realizes there are people who care about this topic and this issue, he will come forward. I want to remind you guys, if you support my work, the best place to follow my work is at theconsciousresistance.com. The best place to support me is theconsciousresistance.com/invest. You can send stuff to my P.O. box. You can sign up on Buy Me a Coffee or Substack. You can send me support via crypto. And of course, the other best way is to visit civil.com and go support Civil. Sign up at Civil as they focus on upgrading civilization by promoting content like my own, by filming at events, streaming award-winning films, documentaries, etc. Go over there and support them, guys, because Civil is now is partnered with me, and I am on residency with them. I will continue to be doing exclusive content with Civil. We're going to continue to work together and do cool things. And the more you support them, the more you support me. So thank you guys so much for being here tonight. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. We're going to wrap up now, as we always do, with a video from a conscious artist. I know I tend to play hip hop and kind of electronic music because that's what I really like lately these days, but I also wanted to play some good old guitar, a little bit of folk from a man who I met recently at the Sound Path to Freedom event. His name is Brendan Daniel. If you've never heard him, you're going to enjoy this, guys. So stay tuned. This is a song from Brendan Daniel called Organized Crime, which is really what we're facing. When you think about who's running things, it's organized crime, mafioso families, secret societies, and other criminal elements working together to control and manipulate the destiny of humanity. But you know what stops that? You know what prevents that? You know what pushes back against that? You, me, all of the free, beautiful people coming together, rising up together, saying, you know what, we're not going to allow ourselves to be divided by immigration or climate change or, arguing about Charlie Kirk or about any other topic. I'm going to stand strong and say, yes, I am a powerful, beautiful, free human being in search of truth and understanding and fighting injustice. And I'm going to work and collaborate with other people, even if they have different viewpoints that I don't necessarily agree with. I'm going to push past my ego, push past that desire to fall into little boxes and silos that says you're like this, so I can't talk to you. You're like that, so I can't talk to you. And push past all that, come together as the free, powerful, beautiful people that we are and build the better world that we know is possible. Upgrade humanity, focus on voluntarism, self-ownership, personal responsibility, human respect. And I promise you, if we put our energy into that, as well as building parallel systems so that we don't have to be dependent on their digital IDs and all of the technocratic enslavement that they're building, if we put our energy into that, we can and we will leave behind a better world for the coming generations, my friends. My name is Derrick Broze. Thank you guys for watching the Conscious Resistance Live, brought to you by Civil. Until next week, please enjoy this music video from Brendan Daniel. As always, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.
I don't think that this ever existed. Put the cart before the horse. The 6-foot point of distance and the damage that's been done. The government, the gun that shoots to save us. And I don't need the pills and vaccinations. I got all the air to breathe. The sunshine on my face is just like medicine to me. Why do we compete with Mother Nature? War is hell, a weapon of taxation. It's been poison in the well. I wonder how they made it so that we could hardly tell the difference between slavery and salvation. All through the turning, all through the turning of time. Let's call it what it is. It's organized crime. All through the turning, all through the turning of time. Let's call it what it is. It's organized crime. For it's easier to trick somebody then it is to convince them that they've been tricked. So pick your tribe, but your choice is an illusion. It's just two sides of the toss, the red one and the blue one. Yeah, they'll televise the fight and demonetize the revolution. Well, history is written by the victors. It's the killing of the king, the sacrificial victim, and the club that you're not in, the power that's corrupted absolutely. All through the turning, all through the turning of time. Let's call it what it is. It's organized crime. They say there's three things that no one can hide. It's the sun and the moon and the truth about organized crime.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.